Hello, Mr. Burrell. Y'all ready to get going? Good morning. Let me get y'all's attention, please. Where's my flag? Okay, so today we're going to do something that most of us here haven't done. Some of us have, which is to kick off the visioning plan for the 2045 plan, which is 22 years from now. So I will be at the illustrious age of 87 and almost 88, if I make it that long, and I sure hope I do. So plan well as we're working today, because hopefully all of us are going to be able to see some of that. So we're going to focus on this one item today, this vision for Virginia's transportation system in 2045, and what the goals need to be that we will set to get there. We, as the board, were responsible for establishing this update in this plan. The existing goals and vision were established over 9 years ago in 2014 and reaffirmed in 2020. And by policy and so forth, we update this every 4 years. So we'll continue the review of the existing visions and goals today that we started and update them to ensure they remain relevant in 23 and then going forward. So why is this important? Our governor's laid out his plan to make Virginia the best place to live, work, and raise a family. And obviously transportation is a key component of that. And we hear it every day. Whether it's safety, our number one priority, still 1,000 deaths more or less a year in Virginia, a high number that keeps getting higher, and it's very disconcerting to all of us. Economic development, quality of life, the ability to get to the grocery store and get to school and go to the places that we want to go safely and efficiently. Environment's obviously a part of that, right? We've got to live in this planet. And so there are all sorts of factors that come together to sort of guide us as we make decisions here about what our transportation plan will look like going forward over the next 20 years. So what's different for us? Maybe a little bit, and as you know, my time on the board goes back some years, back to the McDonnell administration, so I've seen some of this. But maybe I think we're more metric-driven, metric-oriented in this administration, certainly. We like to measure everything, right? And we like our goals to be definable, reachable, stretch goals, but something that we can measure and really see how we're doing. And we do that every day in this administration, whether it's in our cabinet meetings or our MMRs. We had MMRs yesterday. Those are monthly management meetings. Steve's loving it. But we get together with all of our agencies, secretariats, and we have reporting process. We talk about everything from personnel to budget to really everything that impacts these agencies. And it's all based on sort of what our goals are and what our objectives and key results are that we've set up. And so it's just a cadence, it's a natural cadence in business that we go through where we try to see how we're doing against our goals, right? We measure them, we talk about them, we try to find ways to get there if we're not getting there, and so forth. So we're doing that. It's not that state government hasn't done that before, but we're doing it in a little bit different way, I think. And we're very metric oriented. It is great for this kind of exercise as well because we have so many metrics in transportation that we look at and that will help us create these overarching goals. So appreciate you coming in today for this informal meeting. Before we get started with John, because I got launched in before y'all straightened me out, and I feel this isn't a normal meeting because we don't stand up like this, but I have a flag behind me that I'd like to offer a pledge of allegiance. Join me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And I'll tell you, just on a personal note, I've been delaying a trip that I wanted to take with my wife to Israel for about 4 years because of COVID and work and everything else. And I negotiated with my boss to allow me to go because we went for almost a little bit over 2 weeks, which is really hard to do when you're working, as you know. And so we spent a lot of time in Israel. We also went to Jordan. And as I stood there at a particular place in Israel, a town of Eilat down on the Red Sea, sort of a resort town, a beach town, if you will, my phone lights up, and it's the Verizon Connect feature. It says, had already said, welcome to Israel. Ping, welcome to Saudi Arabia. Ping, welcome to Jordan. Ping, welcome to Egypt. I'm standing on the balcony of my hotel, and I'm standing in Israel. I'm looking at Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt, right out there. Not like a long way away over across a mountain. It's right out there. My cell phone's pinging all those towers. And it was sort of like, wow, really? I mean, I knew it was all there, but I just never been there and experienced it. And my point is, what a wonderful and crazy place that is. You know, that 5,000 years of history and people and all sorts of cultures and wars and fights and Christians and Jews and Muslims and Druze and Armenians and, you know, just on and on and on. It's hard to sort of keep it straight. And it was a fantastic trip. But the best part, coming home. Lucky. So, Mr. Lawson is going to run this show today. My job is going to become to disrupt each table at the appropriate time. I don't know if you noticed, but we put the troublemakers, we separated them, and we put them with people that are maybe a little less like that can tamp them down a bit. It was very strategic, and I won't tell you who the troublemakers are, but there'll be a quiz afterwards, and we'll see if we're in alignment or not. With that, I'd like to ask Mr. Lawson to come up, and he's going to run the rest of the day, tell you the agenda and the schedule, and I'll walk around. Mr. Kasperitz, are you, Mr. Kasperitz? Are you being in character, Mr. Kasperitz? Are you being in character? Well, we can help you with that. No, but seriously, appreciate everybody coming. It should be a good day, and John will lead us through the rest of the day. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. Glad you all could come today. I know y'all were excited to spend an extra day in Richmond this month. But as the Secretary mentioned, we are charged with maintaining and managing and driving, no pun intended, Virginia's transportation network. And a large part of that is just strategic planning and visioning that is done by this body. What I'm going to do this morning is just, first I want to run through the agenda so we kind of know what's going on. I think there's some effort underway to get this on your iPads if it isn't already there. The presentation today is going to start off with I guess we'll do an initial presentation, kind of a walkthrough of kind of where we are. And you're not going to have to put up with me all day. We do have a group of consultants that are going to help us work through the VTrans process, and we'll be facilitating at each of the tables as we get into the small group sessions. And as you can see, we're going to go through the presentation. This will take about an hour or so. We'll take a little break. Then we'll start a small group session to talk about the vision. Then we'll come back with a working lunch, and then break out again to talk about goals, and then break, and then come back at the very end of the day to kind of have a summary of where we are, what we've done, agreed to, and then just talk a little bit about how we continue to move forward for the full VTrans process. In terms of this next hour, what we're going to walk through is kind of a series of hopefully informative, materials that will kind of help set the stage for the rest of the day. First, I'm going to go through kind of the roles and responsibilities of the CTB, as well as of VDOT and DRPT as we all work together on transportation's vision. There are some statewide transportation planning requirements I want to touch on, and then I'm going to turn over the presentation to Ms. Otto, that's going to kind of walk through the VTrans process and get us all geared up and ready and excited, hopefully, for these small group sessions that will come. What that's going to include, is an overview of VTrans, a lot of what you heard from Jatenda last month. We're going to talk a little bit about the existing goals and objectives, vision goals and objectives, as we did. Talk a little more about just what they were, and then talk about why it might be time to change them. As the Secretary mentioned, time changes quickly, and a lot's happened since 2014 when these were actually put into place the last time. And then we'll talk about the approach that we're going to use for the update, and then again, kind of what's to come. We do want to keep this pretty informal today, so please, if you have questions as any of us go along, please stop us, and we certainly want to keep this interactive and informative and helpful to everyone. So I hope this is not too repetitive, but we felt that it was important just to kind of retouch base on goals and roles and responsibilities. Many of you board members are relatively new on the board, so I thought it wouldn't hurt just to touch base and revisit some of this. The Commonwealth Transportation Board, is defined in the code, and it is set out as a policy board. As a policy board, its functions are laid out in the code, and the charge really is to promulgate public policy. CTB is not a supervising entity. They don't supervise the agencies or staff. Specific functions, as I mentioned, may include but are not limited to rate setting, the distribution of funds, adjudicating regulatory and statutory violations, and among other things. Again, they are predominantly outlined in the code reference you see there on the right of the screen. This chart gives you kind of when I looked at this chart, it made me think, boy, as board members, you could be full-time employees to do everything you're charged to do if you look at it from that respect. You're charged to establish policies that guide most of the programs, and you see there some examples, VTrans being one, smart scale, state of good repair, revenue sharing. You can read the list, and as you know, the policies are drafted and brought to you for approval that help guide those programs. The distribution of money, the finance side of it. Every year you're charged to approve a 6-year improvement program by July 1st that distributes monies to the projects, and you're also charged with approving VDOT and DRPT's budget each year. Of course, the allocation of funds, as we mentioned, is done kind of through the 6-year improvement program process, and you're also, we don't do a lot of it, but you are the body that is authorized to approve the issuance of Commonwealth Transportation Board debt. Contracting, of course, that's we always a focus of each board meeting. While the agencies can approve contracts up to $5 million, anything greater than $5 million has to come before you. And then there are a number of decisions points around the system that you approve, whether it be routes, naming, limited control, and even performance, as we've got into recently. And Commissioner and Director, at any point that y'all want to chime in and add something today, please do. But, we have really become much more focused on deliverables in recent years and setting those goals and targets and bringing them to you to agree to as we move forward, and with not just the new building of roads, but the maintenance of the existing infrastructure. Turning to VDOT, the VDOT is charged with maintaining, it's the operational entity that is charged with maintaining the system, overseeing and managing projects that you tell are approved in the program, ensuring the safety of the traveling public. And again, the powers and duties of the commissioner and VDOT are outlined in the reference code section. It defines what the commissioner's specific role is. Again, with the CTB being a policy board, the commissioner is appointed by the governor, not by the board. And his role is pretty clear. All acts necessary to maintain, preserve the operating efficiency of the highway. That is pretty all-encompassing. It is a full-time job for him. Full-time is 24/7, I believe, in these terms. And likewise, the director also has a 24/7 job, is appointed by the governor, and is charged with, I like the way the wording is here, well, actually, I'll just go to your mission. I like your mission. To connect and improve the quality of life of all Virginians with innovative transportation solutions. One of the things that's really critical to keep in mind as a board policymaker, but as the two agencies as well, is it is extremely collaborative. In order for a multimodal network to work, there is tremendous collaboration. And I think your mission makes that very clear, that it's all about moving things, people and things, and what is the best way to do it. And under her specific charge is, it's passenger and freight rail. While we do have the new passenger rail authority, you get to be that chair of that board, so you still are heavily engaged there. Transportation demand management, ride sharing, and again, this whole coordination component of working with to reduce congestion by getting traffic from the road onto other modes and means of transportation. And freight is obviously a big piece of this. Yes. I guess no. Well, no, there isn't a real reason. Most of OIP's roles and responsibilities are to support what is required of the board. We're just kind of the entity, almost your staff in some sense. The code references I think that I've listed include what the OIP really has to do. Too low? Okay, that better? Okay, I don't stand still. That's the problem, I guess. I want to just touch briefly on the transportation planning requirements that kind of lead us to where we are today. There's the Code of Virginia requires that the CTB conduct a comprehensive review of statewide transportation needs no less than every 4 years. That is the core of what VTrans aims to do. The code actually sets out what it is intended to do in terms of you need to look at the capacity needs of the corridors, which we defined as the corridors of statewide significance, the regional networks, as well as the UDAs. It is to look at all transportation modes. We're not just highway centric. In order for this to work, we have to look at all transportation modes. The environmental impacts and wildlife corridors are to be considered, as well as what's in local comprehensive plans. Kind of the intent of the long-range plan is to promote economic development, intermodal connectivity, environmental quality, accessibility, newly added resilience, and transportation safety. All these things, we don't talk about as a group often, but we talk about them all the time, as we are looking at the programs and the projects that we are advancing within transportation. And what's important here is that it is a 20-year horizon that we are looking at. There are also federal requirements that have to be met as a transportation entity. And the VTrans also fills that goal. Each state shall carry out a continuing cooperative and comprehensive statewide planning process. As you can see, some of the things that its requirements are for are very similar to what you saw under the state requirements. Economic vitality, safety, security, accessibility, environment, energy, quality of life, intermodalism again. Also bring in management, safe management and operation. I think that one is an important one as we look at the kind of the maintenance of the existing system. Preservation, resiliency, and travel and tourism. VTrans in its entirety is CTB's long-range planning process that is intended to meet the needs, both the state and federal needs, of these requirements, which then in turn establishes the board's priorities for the allocation of funds through the transportation formula. Now we're going to jump into kind of an overview of VTrans, and we'll see if technology will work. We've got a little video that...
Virginia's efforts to improve transportation begin with VTrans, Virginia's transportation plan, which guides policies and investments to improve transportation networks. The first and most critical aspect is the development of the transportation vision, along with goals and objectives. VTrans focuses on the movement of both people and goods and includes all modes of surface transportation, including highways, rail lines, transit services, and bicycle and pedestrian networks. This is to ensure that Virginia's transportation system is good for business, good for communities, and good to go. This vision is accomplished using these 5 goals. The first is economic competitiveness and prosperity, with a focus on reducing congestion and truck bottlenecks and increasing travel reliability. Next is creating accessible and connected places to reduce travel times and trip lengths and increase accessibility to jobs. Safety is our top priority, and our third goal is safety for all users, including motorists, bicyclists, and pedestrians. Next is proactive system management, with the objectives to improve the conditions of our bridges, paving, and sustainable transportation communities, specifically by reducing vehicle miles traveled and increasing the number of trips traveled by walking and biking. Virginia's transportation system is the foundation upon which our economy and our everyday lives are built. It provides access to work, school, and other destinations. It also allows for goods to be shipped around the corner or around the world. Virginia has established the vision and goals and will continue developing Virginia's transportation network to be good for business, good for communities, and good to go. To learn more, visit our website at vtrans.org.
Two-minute snippet of today's plan. That is the vision and goals as it was developed in 2014 and then revisited, I guess, and maintained in 2020. So today's mission is to revisit the vision and the goals and determine where we want to go from here. So with that, I'll turn this over to
Hannah.
Hannah's name wrong, since we're,
The Hannah part's easy.
since we're kind of informal today. Hannah, why don't you introduce your staff before we get going, and then we can move on into the rest of the presentation.
Is this one already? Got it? Got it? Got it? Oh, say, can you see? There we go. Okay, it works. That was my job on the swim team in college. That was what I was best at, was singing the national anthem before the meet. I managed to do I won one race against a girl who couldn't do flip turns. So there you go, after 2 years. I'm Hannah Twaddell. Thank you so much for taking so much time today to spend with us working on the VTrans vision, the statewide transportation plan vision. I've been involved, as have many of my team, in this VTrans process, the development of a truly multimodal planning process for Virginia that's guided by really clearly defined vision and goals and a metrics-driven approach for probably, how long is 1987? Is that 30-something years ago, when I started as the one planner at the MPO in Charlottesville, where I live. So we had 3 people at that agency at the time, so we all got to be a jack of all trades. But from the very beginning, back in the days of Ken Lance and Marcia Fuel working for him, and before DRPT, before Leo Bievan created DRPT, from the beginning, Virginia's transportation agencies worked really closely with us at that regional level to really collaborate and work on creating multimodal systems that function well. And so it's been very exciting and quite a privilege in the 20 or so years I've been doing consulting work, still living in Charlottesville, to always have had some sort of a role in each iteration of VTrans. And so this is a really exciting time. It's I got to tell you, we've worked with a lot of states across the country on statewide plans. Those federal regulations or federal outline you saw a few minutes ago, every state has to address those. Very few states, I can't think of many, do it as rigorously as Virginia. You can get away with having just a policy document that has a few lofty-looking goals and never look at them again. I mean, you can do that. I won't say whether any states do that, but it's possible. But Virginia long ago, if ever, decided, no, let's make this plan meaningful. Let's make it work for us. And we've done several things that we'll talk about in a minute that are really innovative and quite ahead of the curve. We are actually ahead of pretty much every state in many aspects. But before I go on, let me just introduce our team real quickly. Lorna Parkins?
Good afternoon, Lorna Parkins with Michael Baker.
Chris Nazar with CDM Smith.
Hi, I'm Jeff Engelson with ICF.
He's my boss, so you don't like me.
Jeannie Alexander with EPR.
Good morning, everyone. Walker Freer with ICF.
And I'm Todd Gordon with EPR.
And we've got people that have been with VDOT in the past. We have people that have been with city public works departments in Virginia. We have at least one Charlottesville native who did go to Chapel Hill for grad school, but still, Rob's still here. So we've got this is home. This is home for all of us. And so, thankfully, the little video that we helped work on with OIPI did a nice job laying out these next few slides, so we don't have to spend a whole lot of time on them, but we'll dive down a little bit deeper into this VTrans process. One of the many, many unusual things about VTrans is that it's not a static paper document. Again, so most statewide plans, you go on the website, you download a 400-page file, or a 10-page file, and that's their plan. Our plan is really an ongoing process. Thanks to the work done by your staff at OIPI, it's really become a 21st century dynamic process. So it starts with the foundation of the vision and goals we're going to be refreshing today, right? It involves developing measurable objectives. That's primarily the job of the agencies and OIPI staff to work on and bring back to you. And then we take a close look at not only the long-term issues, but also what's coming up soon. What are the midterm, 10-year or so needs that we can identify across the state that are going to be really important critically to address, in the shorter term. And then what are some of the longer term risks and opportunities facing us? So again, we're doing some pretty innovative scenarios over the long term to game out what if trajectories of external change go this way or that way. How can that help us adjust course, right? And then strategic actions. Do you all remember adopting, when was this last strategic plan? 2021, right? I think that you all put together, so I think a lot of you were probably on board at that point, right? And that really directed a lot of the work. You were asking, what does the OIPI staff do? A lot of the work they're doing is to fulfill those kinds of strategies for keeping things moving, addressing long-term risks, improving the way we identify needs, and improving how it all has an impact. One of the biggest impacts, and again, another thing that's kind of unique to Virginia in many ways, is that the goals you set down in the first box there actually affect funding decisions. And that's just genius, I'll tell you. That's one of the hardest things to do. You go to any state transportation agencies, they just kind of despair because the funding decisions are just kind of a mechanism that just seem to keep rolling, and it's very difficult to get, really metric-driven goals and objectives tied to that decision in a meaningful way. But here in Virginia, we have programs like SmartScale, we have programs like the Revenue Sharing Program. These are really important programs, particularly at that local and regional scale to people. So these really affect, basically these lofty things that you might be talking about today, they have a big impact on people's lives in the towns and cities and counties where they live. Because the goals that are set here and the vision that are set here turn into screening criteria and decision-making criteria for your 6-year improvement program, for SmartScale, for other programs. So, and it's all filtered through that midterm needs analysis that helps us to sort of sharpen our focus, right, on what's most important. So again, a lot of times goal setting is sort of a fun, but okay, that was fun exercise. Here, it really is tied to, money decisions. We put our money where our mouth is in Virginia. The current vision, as we saw in the video, I remember crafting. Lorna and I think were both involved with the board at that time. Has a wonderful set of keywords, right, in it. A sustainable, reliable system, right? We were really focused on attracting business. We were focused on what we called a 21st century workforce. And we were focused on healthy communities. So, those were some of the concepts and issues that were high priority in that time, almost 10 years ago. And so one of the things to think about today as we look at you and what your priorities are and what you're hearing from your constituents, what are those keywords now? What are those issues now? Might be exactly the same, that's fine. But we want to refresh and ask ourselves, is the vision still appropriate, right? Same with the goal statements, right? So these goal statements look pretty similar to goal statements in every statewide plan. Basically, this is the purview of what we do as transportation decision makers in one way or another. We affect economic competitiveness and attracting business and so forth. We affect accessibility to places. Accessibility to places, of course, is a two-way street. Pun intended. No one's laughing at my... Thank you for... It's a two-way street because you can build the road or you can put in the transit system, right? You guys can make that priority. You can set the funding. DRPT can implement the transit agency with the locality. VDOT can build the road with the locality. But if there's nothing to do there, then you haven't created accessibility, right? So there's a land use and economic development portion to accessibility that's important to think about, and it is a partnership always. But creating accessibility and connectivity and access to places is perhaps the most important thing we do, and we only can fulfill part of it, of that equation. Safety, we have a lot to do with whether roads and facilities are safe or not. We can control most things, but not all things about that. The proactive system management, we'll be talking in a minute about what things that have changed. That's something that certainly seems to have bumped up in priority over the last 10 years, I would say, even more so. And finally, healthy communities, and looking at sustainability, travel choices, how people get around, as Secretary Miller was saying in the beginning. Can we get to the grocery store? Can we get to school? Is it a system that works for people of all ages? So those were the sort of high priority goals of the time. We established objectives that were mentioned in the video, and we do have a little handout we can give you during your breakout sessions if you want to take a look at those. We won't be going as detailed today in this workshop into actually identifying new objectives. Those are something that the OIPI staff will work on with DRPT and VDOT and the agencies after the workshop. But I felt it was helpful to just sort of, have you take a look and refresh yourself on what those objectives are, because it helps to make the goal more meaningful, right? What did we mean by that goal specifically? When you say safety or security, those are big words. That could mean a lot. So I think looking at the objectives helps us get an understanding, again, a snapshot of what were the important issues of that time that we felt we needed to focus on, and it'll help us revisiting, is that still, top priority? Yes or no? If it's still top priority, is it still in the same way? Are there nuances to it that are different now? So, I won't walk through all of those, but you've got those on your sheet, and you'll have a chance to really digest them in the discussion groups. The other thing that you had in the 2014 VTrans that has sort of continued on was something called a set of guiding principles, and these were really more something that were globally applied to like all of VTrans. So they were not necessarily measurable goals, that you could set objectives for as easily, but they were something the board felt, were important statements to make that supported that overarching vision. And we've got some thoughts about, how you might want to incorporate the spirit of these as you move forward, whether or not you want to continue having a set of guiding principles or not, whether you want to simplify it to a vision and goals and objectives. But either way, having the spirit of some of these bigger picture commitments, principles, if you will, that the board felt was important at the time. So we'll talk more about those again when we get to the breakout sessions. So as I think has been said, these statements could be valid for California, for North Carolina, for, pretty much, you could see them almost anywhere, with the exception perhaps of some of the objectives that start to get really specific. But I think the question today is this who you are now? This is your board and your process and your constituents that you're thinking about. One of the other observations I made with Mr. Lawson the other day when we were meeting and preparing for this was the uniqueness of Virginia's Commonwealth Transportation Board setup. Again, this is a very unusual way of making decisions in states. In many states, there's not a board like you. It's not as citizen-driven. It's really kind of a little bit more black box, if you will, or kind of just within government quite often. And we don't have this mix, this important mix of people representing districts and people at large. And I think having that balance of people who are here to be thinking about specific constituencies and people that are here to really be thinking about the state as a whole is a wonderful dynamic. Again, it's really unique to Virginia that we do it this way. And I can't stress enough the importance of that statewide perspective, because you're the only body that's charged with specifically looking at statewide issues. in transportation and establishing those goals. Nobody else gets to do this except you. So it's important that it's done with that kind of balance and dynamic. So some of the things that have changed since 2014. We'll spend just a few minutes kind of on these high-level bullets, pulling in a little bit of interesting facts and findings and data that might help us to stimulate some thought and imagination about what we want to focus on when we change. But there have been changes in our priorities and requirements, as Mr. Lawson was saying. You know, that maintenance-driven focus has gone up. The metrics-driven approach has definitely multiplied, pun intended. The metrics have multiplied. I'll say it again, and laughter. Okay, thank you. That whole approach has gone up, which puts a different spin on things. We've also had a lot of changes since 2014 globally, nationally. So back then, we were sort of emerging from the Great Recession and about to go into Spanish flu part 2, right? Between the pandemic and the Great Recession was about the time these goals were set. So some food for thought to think about. Things have changed a lot, and some things have changed for good, some things maybe not. And finally, we've got some shifts in public perspectives, public opinion. We do a transportation public opinion survey every couple of years. You've seen, I think you've got copies, or they've been pushed out to you, of the survey report, and I think you've heard little bits about it over the last few months. So we'll share a few highlights again, intended to give you just some food for thought when we get to the breakout groups. So the maintenance first approach, this budget language from the General Assembly Act, most recent, right, is very clear about the priority of spending our money on maintaining existing assets for the safety of the traveling public. And I'm sure you all are keenly aware of this, because much of what you do is make these kind of funding decisions. So this is top of mind for you. It's top of mind for the state legislature. It's in the code as well, right? So we're very clear that we have to be responsible for the systems that we've built. And so several programs have been created since 2014, specifically towards this focus. The State of Good Repair program, the Special Structure program, which focuses on a few major highway and bridge infrastructure pieces. Some of you probably were here when you developed that prioritization approach and fund distribution back in 2016 for that State of Good Repair program. So these are all ways in which, through code language, through new programs, Virginia's already committed to that kind of philosophy of maintenance first. We've also developed phenomenal metrics. How many of y'all have been on the VTrans website and played around on the Interact VTrans map? Raise your hand if you've seen it. Yep. Look, all the staff have. There we go. Isn't it cool? Yeah, I'm telling you. No, go to any other state. You don't see anything like this. This is unbelievably sophisticated. Partly because under, I think it was Governor Byrd, right? Virginia decided to go the route of having the state manage the entire roadway network from the beginning, with the exception of Arlington and Henrico. We manage all the secondary roads. That's very unusual, as many of you probably know. Most states just own the state highways, and then everything else is local. But because we have all this infrastructure, and because DRPT works so closely with all the transit agencies and passenger and freight rail providers, we have several, like 200,000, more than 200,000 data points on what we call a linear referencing system, a big map, that allow us to examine just all kinds of needs and issues at a very fine-grained level. So this little blue stripe in the middle is right out there, out that front door. I just happened to grab that one and said, what's happening on Broad Street? Look at that. There's a safety need that was identified in the last update of the midterm needs analysis, which we'll be updating again this year for you. And I can't go, without more information, I can't go into a lot of detail about specifically what we know about it, but it's there, and we're aware of it. But that kind of level of specificity, of being able to really look at the bridges way out in Southwest Virginia, every one of those little bridges, we know a lot about them. And that really helps us to clarify what the needs are in terms of where we've got safety hotspots, where we've got freight bottlenecks, where we've got congestion or travel time reliability, where people can get there in 30 minutes one day and 90 minutes the next day, and you can never predict. The other thing, besides this very data-driven resource we have and process we have for frequently looking at the 10-year picture, right, and saying what's in front of us, what's coming up soon, what do we know right now, we also have a very interesting, what we call a risk and opportunity register. This is good business practice. Some of you may have done this. Have you ever done like a risk analysis in your business? Yeah? So what did you look at in the what's a good example of like a business level risk analysis? What do you think? Mm-hmm. Great. Right. So look at externalities like market fluctuations in the marketplace, or the capacity of the company to make what it makes or do what it does, right? What might affect that? Had we all been able to do COVID scenarios in 2019 for our businesses, that would have been helpful, right? So we all know the value of realizing that there are shocks, there are stressors, there are things that are slowly kind of creeping up on us that we can see. There are things that are slowly creeping up that we can't see, but we suspect are there. And then there are shocks that just, come kind of out of the blue. And so the more we can pay attention to those and monitor those and do the very best we can to figure out the relative levels of risk and opportunity each of these kinds of external factors might present to us over the longer term time horizon by 2045 or so. So we've picked, OIPI has worked out about 10 of these external factors with a lot of research and bubbling up to say things like the growth of electric vehicles in the marketplace, for example, which is really happening. The level at which they'll be absorbed is somewhat unknown, so we need to come up with a couple different scenarios. What if it's this high? What if it's that high? We know a fair amount about population growth trends and, reasonably assume some changes there. E-commerce, particularly shot up during COVID, but it was already quite a thing. Amazon was doing just fine in 2019. So those trends are well underway, and many others. So let's just take a look at a few of those data points, and then I encourage you to go back and play around with that long-term risk and opportunity register on the VTrans website as well, because it's just fascinating. You could just spend all day. This is a fun place to work, right? So, a couple of key things that we just keyed in on that we wanted to put in your brain to think about as we're working on updating vision and goals here today. This is charts going from Woods and Pool data going from 2000 to 2045. So basically the first half of this century is what you're seeing on the screen here. This one talks about population, the next one talks about jobs. And the big takeaway that I think we saw was the continued growing predominance in terms of the percentage of population around the state, and in the next slide it's the percent of jobs around the state in Northern Virginia. And collectively with Fredericksburg, sort of a close behind there. The relative sort of slight shift in kind of the weight of the economic activity, the job base in Hampton Roads, that region, which may be partly due to simply needing a smaller labor force for the same, economic productivity in the military and other facilities. So we're talking about the number of people working here and where they're working and where those jobs are. And then places like the Richmond region are keeping pace with the state. So their share, is growing at about pace with the state. And most of the other regions are more or less maintaining their presence relative to everybody else. But the big sort of continued trend clearly seems to be that predominance of jobs in Northern Virginia, which brings with it all kinds of ancillary trends, people moving there, people trying to find affordable housing there, people living in West Virginia and commuting to DC, right? I think anybody who's from that region, represents that region, knows that region. These are some of the issues that the CTB doesn't have purview over, right? Affordable housing, for example. But there's a direct transportation implication, right? If that's not available, we're going to see changes in how long people have to commute. You drive till you qualify for a mortgage, right, is the phrase. Similarly with jobs, we're getting up to maybe the half of the state's jobs, starting to creep up on the 40% mark. And then when you add Fredericksburg, you're over the 40% mark of the jobs in the state being up there. So kind of good news, you've got the people and the jobs, the big weight gravity centers in the same region. It would be kind of awful if you had all the people in Bristol and all the jobs in DC from a transportation perspective, at least with the technologies we have today. So the state is that picture is happening at a balanced pace, if you will. But it's one of those things that's important to keep in mind in terms of our backdrop of the conditions in 2045 or so, which is when our vision is really trying to shoot for and our goals are trying to shoot for. Few of those other external factors, and we just sort of picked these out, just a few, and this is from the Risk and Opportunity Register. Remember we looked at like 10 different trends, electric vehicles, automated vehicles, environmental conditions, population shifts. So when you combine them all together and turn the dials, say, what if we have a higher penetration of electric vehicles? What if everybody's driving an electric vehicle? What if nobody, is? Already the nobody isn't an option because we already have a chunk of people driving them. But if we sort of slide each of those external factors up and down, how does it play out in terms of the potential growth in vehicle miles traveled? So this is automobiles and trucks, right, on the roadway. And so depending on how you mix and match or shift the dials for these different external factors, we might see a really modest increase in congestion, or we might see up to as much as about a 17% increase, and that's all basically a relative increase to today. What do you think are some of the external factors? I already said one. What was the one that I said that might cause that? Affordable, right. So the affordable housing issue in a highly, highly populated center in Northern Virginia, that might be one of those external factors that kind of no matter what, I sort of suspect that one's a part of that 4%, just because that's a trend that's just already here today, right? One more, VMT one, I mentioned it. See if you were listening. So the growth in e-commerce, Amazon, all those delivery vehicles, right? Just going. Post office guys have to work on Sunday. Isn't it awful? I was so confused seeing post office trucks driving around until I realized they were dropping off Amazon packages. That's what they're doing. So that's how 24/7 e-commerce already is. If we have automated vehicles running around 24/7, right, picking up people and doing the kind of taxi cab function they can do, you may have vehicles that never park in cities. They just circulate around constantly all day. So all those things could lead to a rise in vehicle miles traveled. On the other hand, in urban centers, particularly, there's a good chance we'll see more and more people switching to something other than driving, especially if congestion goes up. You pick the most convenient mode. So for me, when I go to DC, I always take the Amtrak train. Thank you very much, Jennifer and company, for the extra trains to Charlottesville and Roanoke. I always take Amtrak. I never drive to DC. because I don't have to, and it's much more convenient to use the metro. And they've got Capital Bike Share, and they've got e-scooters, although I'm terrified to use one of those, but I'll get there. Or e-bikes, which is like the biggest, flashiest, coolest thing that in our public survey that we'll talk to you about in a few minutes. That was the one thing that everybody who had one said they loved it in the public survey. So it was a tiny proportion of the public, but I thought it was interesting. Has anybody ridden one yet? An e-bike, electric bike? Yeah? Is it totally fun? It's awesome. There you go. I know. So power-assisted pedaling. So those kinds of things, they're going to get more affordable. Even Teslas are starting to, get more affordable, right? So if the market likes it. So these could, these numbers are relative based on our best, projections right now. Maybe it'll go up further in those urban centers, offsetting some of that congestion in those urban core centers. Reducing fatalities and serious injuries. Here's a little bit of good news that just because of external factors, a lot of which have to do, for example, with vehicle technology, that's the success rate we've had for the last several decades is seat belts. That helped a lot when we developed those and started making people use them. And that was a decision that wasn't in the CTB's purview, right? But we kind of got a little bit of the reflected glory by having safety improve because of seatbelts or drunk driving laws or other things that happen around us. So that we can see some potential improvements in safety that are probably going to occur because of some of these new technologies, because of more efficient movement, things like truck platooning, has anybody heard of that? That phrase, truck platooning? It's where our company's been doing some research with Federal Highway on special test tracks, and I think we've had some in Virginia, right, at the Virginia Tech Center, right? Yeah. So you can take those giant trucks that travel on 81 and 66, and with automated pilot technology, they can travel as close together as freight train cars safely at 60 miles an hour, 65 miles an hour. So they can basically operate like a little freight train on one of the highway lanes and get out of your way when you're driving. You don't have to mess with them, and they just go like a rocket. So there's a wonderful example of maintaining your existing system, right? So that it's capable of taking that kind of technology and using it, and you can take a roadway lane and use it for that purpose and solve a whole bunch of safety problems and congestion problems all at once without ever adding a mile of pavement. You're just reusing your existing system differently. So that's why it's exciting to think about these kinds of technologies that are all advancing around us and how we can optimize them, right? And then finally, looking at what we know about just sea level rise, something that's already happening, something that's increased storms, increased flooding. These are things that are happening around us. We want to take a look at what we know is most likely to occur, so pulled up some environmental data. So we've got more than 1 million miles, directional miles of roadway lanes potentially at risk of inundation from sea level rise. Again, a really important maintenance question, right? And that's roadway miles. We've also got some bridges, right, to think about. We've got tunnels to think about. So not just in coastal areas, but in inland. And we've got a lot of rivers and creeks in Virginia, an awful lot of little bridges, right? So just the impact of water and how water is already changing and potentially is going to continue to change in Virginia. We've got a bead on, is that a pun? Yeah, a water bead. That's a pretty good pun. We've got a bead on, how that water might flow and where it might go and how it may affect our systems over the next 50 years. Really valuable knowledge. And finally, greenhouse gas emissions, things that make our air difficult to breathe. Again, a lot of that vehicle electrification, potential advances in things like truck platooning or more efficient travel. Have any of you driven a car, maybe you have one, or a rental car, where if you put it on cruise control and then somebody gets in front of you and the car automatically slows down? Did you think the cruise control was broken? Yeah, I did too. It's not. It's an automated vehicle function. A lot of our cars have it. It reacts to the traffic around you to keep you safe, right? So there's one more vehicle crash that didn't happen. There's one more transportation efficient, less gas emitting, scenario on the highway. So it's those kinds of things that can really make a difference. So I think what we'll do is spend the last couple of minutes before our break at 11:10 talking about some of the things we heard from the public. And Chris, I think I'll let you speak to this, and then we'll take our break, and when we come back, we'll talk about what we'll be doing during the breakouts.
All right, thank you, Hannah. Got it there.
Tell us your name again.
Yes,
It's really hard to hear it all.
certainly.
List of folks' names and their companies. We'll have one soon.
So Chris Nasarim with a firm called CDM Smith. We've been involved with the past VTrans update and this one as well. OIPI conducted a survey surveying more than 7,000 Virginians on really what is the user, or if we're talking in business terms, our customer perspective on the transportation system. And at over 7,000 responses, this is a statistically valid survey, not only for the state as a whole, but for each construction district and looking at the urban and non-urban areas in the state. So the survey was conducted to help support this development of vision, goals, and objectives for VTrans, but also the intention is it gets repeated every 2 years as a biennial survey and allows for comparison of trends in user perspective over time, and that's very important as well. So just some notes at the results I'm going to present. If you look at the statewide results, satisfaction with ability to access employment opportunities by rideshare. I'm going to talk about satisfaction. The two green numbers together, 21 plus 25 is 46%. So when you see on a further slide, I talk about 50% satisfied. That's the addition of those two types of responses. You'll note that for a lot of these questions, the neutral answer, neither satisfied or dissatisfied, is often the highest number. So if I say something like 44% of folks were satisfied, added those two green ones there, 46% in this case, that doesn't automatically mean 54% were dissatisfied because of that neutral or neither satisfied or dissatisfied number. So I just wanted everybody to be aware of that with the numbers I'm presenting.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
So if I went out in the street and I used the word you just used, and I said, are you satisfied or dissatisfied by opportunities for rideshare? And I asked the people out in the street, is that how we would ask the question, or would we explain what we're talking about?
The survey did have detailed, the question was, if I asked folks out there, are you satisfied with rideshare, would they know what we meant? And the answer is we put in explanatory notes to help define some of the terms that we were using in asking the question.
It's always nice, as we read the results of things, that we understand the question that was asked, right? Because I bet you if I went in here and I surveyed everybody and said, write down what is rideshare in this room, I bet you wouldn't have a consistent answer. And these are people that. That's
Right, yeah.
So it'd be nice to sort of not condense this down to a place where we just accept it on its face, but we understand what the real question was.
Absolutely, and the doc.
I think a lot of your neutral can often be, well, I don't know, so I'm good. Not, as far as I know, it's not affecting me badly, so I'm okay. Right? right? But it doesn't get to the point because they don't really know the answer.
I think that's also a pertinent observation when it comes to, say, we ask questions about the condition of transit. Well, if you're not a transit rider, you probably answer neutral to that type of question too.
The survey would probably say, do you use transit? And if you don't use transit, you're out of the survey because you don't know. I mean, I'm just surveying people that have no idea what the transit is because they never use it, don't see it, got no idea.
Yeah, and we didn't kick folks out of the survey for that, but we actually do have that breakdown, for folks who did say whether or not they use transit on a regular basis.
Common
Yeah.
sense, we would think that people that use it would have more knowledge about it than people that don't use it
Absolutely.
across the board.
No question. So a lot of the questions covered a variety of different categories. We did ask questions to assist you with opinion on the goals and objectives. We talked about the opinions on the use of emerging technology, electric vehicles, autonomous and connected vehicles, the availability of different modes of transportation for people to get around, satisfaction with travel in different conditions, and things like, especially post-pandemic, the telecommuter, work from home situation. So we did link some of the questions to the goals that currently exist, and we've gone through the goals, but just so you know, we did this linking. And so what we found out is that goal A, which has to do with supporting the economy and reducing congestion, was the one that received the most votes as the most important goal. In second place was ensuring transportation was safe and secure, so linked to goal C. And then tied for third place was ensuring transportation allows for efficient access and ensuring transportation is well maintained. So just so you have an understanding of where the goals stacked out in terms of opinion. So here's some of those satisfaction ratings. You can see this is with the condition of the transportation system. Bridges, roads, had a net positive in terms of satisfaction, 55 and 51%. Urban area sidewalks, right at 50%, but in the rural areas, that's lower. Condition with bus stops and park and ride and rail stations, again, higher in the urban areas than in the non-urban areas. And then satisfaction with bicycle lanes was the lowest here. Again, if you're not a bicycle lane user, we did see a lot of neither satisfied or dissatisfied responses in this question. Yes, sir.
Do you have normative data about what would be the range of answers to these types of questions across time or across other jurisdictions?
We don't have an exact set of data. What there is past things like the National Household Travel Surveys that for certain categories of answers that we could do some comparison to answers across the country. But one of the value of this over time is we're going to have to be able to see, 2 years from now how some of these answers may change and make policy, connections to that. So some of the satisfaction with perspective related to driving, almost 60% were satisfied with travel time reliability. And in fact, that is positive in both urban and non-urban areas. However, only 36% are satisfied with congestion. So that means folks are satisfied that they know how long it's going to take, but still see a higher level of congestion. Residents satisfied with safety, about 45%. It's actually over 50% in non-urban areas. And then households that do not have a working vehicle, this is very interesting from a policy setting standpoint, is 5%. And then some of the go ahead.
When you look at our districts, is there a range or is it really the difference between urban and non-urban?
There is a range for some of these questions in the districts, and I don't have those slides here, but go get a deeper dive into the report that was sent out, you will see some of those differences. So that ability to ride share, once it was explained, Uber and Lyft is what we're talking about. Yes. Okay, you're illustrating the point. Yes. But this is how the question was more asked. So the Uber and Lyft was in the question. So 77% indicated they have that availability if they want to use it. Availability of a local or city bus is just over half. Satisfaction with the reliability of transportation, a little bit lower. And then ability to get to jobs, only 33% satisfied that a transit option would be good to get to jobs.
Are you saying you stopped using your word in the 77%, didn't use satisfied, or in the 51%? Is that?
Yes, so let me back that up. Some questions we just asked about whether it was available to them. So in order to understand,
Satisfied with the level of availability?
pardon? Sorry, sir.
Satisfied with the level of availability?
It's just available. That's where we get some of that indication of whether they're familiar with it and could use it or not. Because if a certain type of service is not available, then again, we would wonder about their opinion on the condition of that service. So, yes. Okay, yes, sir.
I don't think that, frankly, I don't think that gets to the reality of the situation. If I know Uber and Lyft exist in my community, does that make it available? And does that mean I'm happy with it? And does that mean I like it? Does that mean I use it? What does it mean? It's just there? That's all I know is it's there?
Yeah, so we have.
All I know is there doesn't tell me all.
You're right. It just says about when we're talking about newer technology, how really available it is. We do have questions that break it down. We just didn't put it in the slide here on usage.
I mean, I hate to be sort of getting in the weeds, but at the end of the day, when you do surveys, that's what's important is that what people are understanding, they're answering, right? And if I ask somebody that it's whether it's available or not, and they've heard about it and they know it exists, then that is available. So what? Do I use it? Is it available when I want it? Is it the right cost? So the people, is it safe?
Yeah, very.
That's what I would want to know.
Very.
That's going to imply my usage, not just that I heard that it's available.
Very good point, sir. We probably just picked the wrong stat to put in there. Those statistics are in the survey, sir.
I'll shut up for a while.
So walking and biking, much lower satisfaction scores overall for walking and biking options. And 14 and 13% of the population walk or bike to work at least one day a week, work or school. And then just some technology trends. 70% of the population is willing to use Amazon delivery, having packages delivered that way, not surprising. 60% would be willing to use an airborne drone delivery service. That was an interesting result. 45% of owners that do not own an electric or hybrid vehicle would be willing to consider purchasing one. 25% of residents that have access to e-bikes or e-scooters, so not as great access as other items, and 9% actually own an EV or hybrid vehicle, so just some an electric or a hybrid vehicle. So that's just some survey results. It's a very thin, high-level look at what is a very deep report with a lot of different answers and breaks this down by districts, by urban, non-urban, different categories. So just an initial sort of teaser to assist you with your work today.
Thanks, Chris. So why don't we, if there are other questions about the survey or the data that we shared before we take a break? Any other, because I know it's time to stretch. All right. Can we take 10 and be back at 11:30? Is it okay to deviate a little bit from the? Yeah. 12:30 for lunch. Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think? Does it work to break now? and reconvene 11:30, and we'll start our small groups then? Okay, all righty, great, thank you. Thank you, great. All right. Is that better? Test, 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 test. Is that better? And turn it up a little bit, Devante. Hello, hello, hello. By the dawn's early light. Yeah. All righty. All righty. Freestyle, badly. Oh my, oh my. Man, that stroke. I think the devil invented that stroke just to torture people. Oh, golly, that is one strong kid. Oh, golly. Oh, golly. Hello, hello, hello. Great. Okay. So for the rest of the day, we get to have so much fun. We get to play cards, which is like a matching game of cards. And then in the afternoon, who remembers Mad Libs? Anybody remember Mad Libs? Right? Yay, yay, people of my generation, yay. So we get to play Mad Libs this afternoon. We get to play cards right now. It's a fun way to do a serious activity, right? So a few things in this breakout session between now and lunch around 12:30. We will be focusing on the vision statement. Thank God you will not be asked to wordsmith and dive into the weeds and do something painful. We will be really collecting really just high-level keywords, snapshots, things that we can then use, take back to draft a vision statement for your approval at the next couple of meetings of the CTB. But as you're thinking about the vision, and then this afternoon, the goals, supporting goals, think about the what you want to see in the future. Don't worry too much about the how. This is one of the things that's always difficult because we tend to stop ourselves up with, I want to lose 25 pounds. And there's a goal, and then I start going down the rabbit hole of, but I don't know, maybe I should reset that goal because I don't know if I can do it. So if you've got an ambition, set the ambition, and then you let the agencies and the staff, figure out the how. But give clear direction about the ambition you want. And so focus on the issues that we can influence. Remember this morning we were giving that example of vehicle miles traveled increasing in Northern Virginia because the jobs are there, but the affordable housing is out there. So, we can influence some of that. So it's important to talk about that. It's also important to recognize that there's some external factors we may or may not be able to influence. So just keeping that kind of, back and forth in mind when we're talking about setting a vision or a goal statement, and thinking about already what we know about external factors and how they're changing things. That's what makes this such an immediate, new, fresh vision statement. Just think about the difference the pandemic made between 2014 and now in the way we live. In 2014, we were all like saying, wouldn't it be great if more people teleworked? Wouldn't it be great if everybody's company allowed them to telework? Employees were like begging their companies to let them work remotely in 2014. And companies were resisting it all over the place, right? Not a problem anymore. Now we're having trouble getting people to come back to the office. So we're seeing real changes in travel patterns, because the one thing about teleworkers that we knew back when, and we still know, is that they don't necessarily drive less. They just drive at different times of day. So you don't get quite the morning commute peak, but you kind of get traffic all day long. So that's the sort of things we can think about. Couple of just definitions, the vision, what you want Virginia to be in 2045. So we're going to have some fun just brainstorming, what's your vision? What do you want it to look like? What do you want it to be? We'll be asking you to jot down some keywords on note cards and arranging them for a while. If you'd rather draw a picture on your note card, that's totally fine. But the idea is to just get literally vision pictures going on that are responsive to what you value and what your constituents value, what Virginia values, right? Later on this afternoon, when we're talking about goals, then that's where we're going to be really prioritizing what is it we need to do to accomplish that vision. Again, not getting down in the weeds about the how, but just stating out there, this has to happen. You know, what's it going to take to move us towards that vision, right? And by the way, we're printing copies of these slides for you all, so we'll have them by lunchtime. So you've got a paper copy of these things. And again, when it comes to setting objectives, that's when, you know, the agencies are getting busy working on the how. And so you will see proposed objectives to support the goals that you set after this workshop. And then finally, this notion of a guiding principle, which is something that the CTB did for the first time back in 2014, that hadn't been done before, that was really supposed to be more about how you wanted to operate as a body, regardless of what topic, regardless of what goal, you know, more about how you wanted to operate. That's something you could, you know, choose to continue having. The current guiding principles are shown on the screen here. Optimizing return on investment, which sounds a lot like maintenance first, right? And kind of a similar theme. Ensuring safety, that actually sort of sounds a lot like a goal too. Being efficient in the way we deliver programs, that's actually something that's kind of more in the agency's purview, quite honestly. I mean, that's what VDOT and DRPT and the other agencies hold themselves accountable for, right? Is how projects get done on time, right? And on budget. Considering operational improvements and demand don't laugh, and demand management first. Again, sort of that maintenance first idea. Transparency and accountability. Coordinating between transportation and land use. This is what we were saying a few minutes ago about that being kind of a broad principle, and then a commitment to intermodality. So you can sort of see when we refresh our thinking about goals that quite a number of these, this is just me, I stuck these little icons on the left as sort of a first shot of several of those guiding principles really kind of get us into the how question, and maybe it's something you might want to consider saying, let's let the agencies absorb that one, you know, that may or may not be something we need to, you know, pull into the goals. And then maybe those two, the safety, security, and the intermodal connectivity, maybe those two are so close to goal statements already, you know, maybe that's something you'll wind up wanting to fold into your goals. So you don't have to, you know, make this decision, certainly not in this first session when we're mostly talking about vision, but later on in the goal setting discussion, we might want to, you know, touch base on what you want to do with the previous guiding principles. So we're looking ahead to about a 2045 time horizon. So quick, do the math. How old will you be? How old will your grandchild be? Lorna. Do the math. It'll be 24. 22 in a week. He was born a week ago. Congratulations, Lorna. So we've got one 22-year-old Virginian who's going to be by then, hopefully, traveling back and forth to college and graduating on Virginia's transportation systems. So do this for Lorna's grandchild. This is that population that we're thinking about in terms of the vision for what the conditions they will have and how they will be able to launch their lives and run their lives, as well as taking care of their poor grandmother, Lorna. Will they have to drive her around, or will she be able to get around without needing them to? There's a good question. We're not dealing with fiscal constraint. Thank God today is not a day when you have to worry about money. So yay, because that's what you worry about almost every other day. And really growing out of your own policies and your own directives that you've had. And then again, the goals can be revisited. The vision really is something that needs to kind of stay constant for a while. But the goals and the objectives, those can get sort of revisited over time and adjusting. It's kind of like setting sail for somewhere. You want to have your destination in place, but then as the wind changes and the sharks come, you might want to change course a little bit, right? So, but this is really, where are we going, right? Where is it we're heading for? What's the condition, the future state we're heading for? So this was what it said last time, or what it currently says. Again, this is good vision statement. You may want to just keep this and be done. But you also may want to play with it a little bit, right? So every table, there's 3 tables. You each have facilitators. So Lorna and Todd are at this table, Jeff and Walker. At that table, Jeannie and Chris. At that table, we'll also print out a copy of our names and contact information for y'all. Someone requested that too, so you can get to know us better. But we're going to spend the next probably 45 minutes total right through lunch. So we'll probably spend about 25 minutes brainstorming ideas on these little cards, and they'll explain to you how to do that, organizing the cards into a few themes. Then hopefully we'll take a minute to just pause and have everybody look at what everybody else is doing. This is a day when it's actually appropriate to cheat and look over everybody else's work. And then wrap up that session with what did we see from what's collectively happening around the table. So at the end of this session, we're going to have a set of themes, a sort of a short list of key themes, key words, key concepts that we can then shape into a vision statement. Any questions before you all get started? Any observations or thoughts? You just want to get going. Yep. Great. Good. Ready? Set. Go for it. Talk. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then you just capture kind of. You might just scroll to your. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you all so much for coming back for this last little bit of the day. This is the fun part. We get to see what everybody came up with. So the process that we wanted to go through was to have just sort of one of the tables take a start, and we've been busily sort of typing up what Chris's table here had put together, and then we're going to ask for people to take a look at that and see how much they covered of the same thing or how much what you came up with was different, and we'll get to see collectively where we are. But I think you've done like a whole lot of work today, so congratulations ahead of time. Chris, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the goals statements you all came up with for the themes?
Okay, I think goal 1 is already typed. So yes, it's the second one under economic growth. So Virginia's multi-state commitment to transportation solutions will provide reliable transportation options to accomplish safe and efficient movement of goods, services, and people to spur economic growth. All right. Our second one, not typed yet, so it's the one Walker right here, which goes under innovation or nimble/innovative. So Virginia's multimodal transportation system embraces innovative, creative, and cost-effective solutions that are responsive to the variety of community types in the Commonwealth. Community types in the Commonwealth, yeah. So just communities becomes community type. Yes. Yeah, there you go. Yep. And then one more that's not typed. Yeah, that's not this group. Yeah. So goal 3 under the fully integrated and sustainability area. Do we have that? Virginia's multimodal transportation system will increase opportunities for people and businesses to efficiently access services, activity centers, distribution hubs, and daily living activities. It is actually a close rewrite of goal B, the existing goal B.
And the other goals that you're seeing on the screen are some of the ones that he's describing and capturing from other groups. So those were some of the sort of top 3 out of your group, is that right? Yep.
It's employment, comma, services. Yeah. Yeah. Activity centers, distribution hubs, and daily living activities. And our other 2 are up there. We had a safe one and an environmental one. Yeah.
All right. How about adding on to any of those? Lorna, do you want to? This way we sort of get nuances with ones that are similar and then really capture.
So yeah, the first one under innovation came from this group. And it says technological innovations will deliver efficiencies and affordability to system users. So it kind of it hits on a couple different areas really, but we really were focused on innovation as a means of achieving efficiency and affordability. And then we had another one that was part innovation and part efficient and affordable. So I put it down under efficient and affordable. And that is that, let's see, yeah, Virginia's transportation agencies will encourage employee-driven innovation to accomplish cost-effective solutions. So, that kind of gets to what we were talking about in terms of, being context-specific, as well as taking into account kind of the wealth of knowledge that comes from the people who are managing our system day to day. So that was another goal that kind of could have gone in either place. And then also in that category, we had a simple one. Virginia's multimodal system will provide reliable travel times to commuters to improve quality of life, because that's such a significant part of what really makes everyone's daily life more or less livable, right? And then if you scroll back up, Walker, one last one we had, keep going up. I think we had so under economic growth, we really talked a lot about the competitiveness aspect, how Virginia is competing with other places. And so, one of the things that businesses evaluate is just, getting their goods into the facility and their products out to market. And so the way we express that is that Virginia's highways, rail, and intermodal facilities will provide coordinated access to ports and airports to accomplish economic growth. So we really wanted to recognize those key components of the system that relate to economic opportunity. Did I miss anything? Is that good? Okay.
When we move from growth, so on growth we say things like provide coordinated and provide reliable. If you go above that to the previous one, embrace innovation, deliver efficiencies. And those are all very different terms, and when you go down a little bit. time. But when I say that, and I come back and look at what I've done in the next 20 years, have I gotten there? Did I have an increase? If I do one, that's an increase, right? If I got 100 and I do one, that's an increase. If I do 50 on 100, that's a much different thing. So what am I really looking to do there? So it's not very measurable. It's not, I don't know how to get my arms around that. In terms of, okay, if I want to do that, let's say Jennifer was working with somebody to redesign bus routes. And we looked at all the demographics, and we looked at all the patterns, and we said, here are the new routes that we think we need to accomplish X, Y, and Z. And that's going to require these buses, or this change, or this kind of difference, or whatever it might be. Then we could kind of say, okay, we know what we want, we know what it's going to cost, am I getting a good return on that? And we make decisions about how we allocate our resources. But when I just say increase opportunities, I don't know what that really means.
Does improve access do it?
Yeah, I guess Mary, some of it, I'm
No, I
playing devil's
mean,
advocate.
we're in a wordsmith.
Yeah, but I
I
mean,
would say
it's-
I think there's legitimacy to your point. At the same time, we're also saying people need to go to these places and businesses need to
Yeah,
move goods.
absolutely.
So if increase opportunity is too fuzzy, we could say, improve access. And that's measurable. We can say this many people had access, now this many people have access.
I guess what I'm really trying to get at is, and this is a 20-year document, so it's not like a 4-year budget. And it's going to be different than we think it's going to be. Not perfectly predictable. But when I do that, if I look back 20 years from now, and I increased my multimodal opportunities by 0.5%. If I was going to be a stickler, I'd say we increased the opportunities. We had success. We declared victory, we put the flag in the ground, and march on. But if really what I wanted was a 50% increase, then I failed miserably. And the point is, I don't know which one it is. So I don't know how to measure whether I did okay or not. And listen, it's a vision document. I get it. So it's going to be a little bit fuzzy. It's going to be a little bit sort of. But at the end of the day, I want to know what I need to do to get there. It's like the greenhouse gas. Okay, well, let's say we reduce. Let's say we buy all that and we reduce greenhouse gases by 0.5%. It's insignificant. It doesn't change a damn thing. Did I get anything? No, I didn't get anything. If I need to change it by 10% to get what I want, I'm making these numbers up, then I would like it to say, we need to change it, we need to decrease it by 10%. And how do we get there? That's the problem I have with the national campaign that says 0 highway fatalities in the country. It's insane to me, because we'll never get there. And so if we decrease it by 10%, are we victorious? Well, not if you got to get to 0, you'll never get there. So I'm a guy that wants to sort of understand where the goal line is, and then assess what I need to do to get to the goal line, and then measure myself along the way and say, how am I doing? And correct as I need to correct. But I don't know where the goal line is.
Is it supposed to be in this
Well, that's
statement?
what I'm
No.
saying. It's a vision statement. I get it.
So my point, well, honestly, is, if we want to improve access for people and businesses, and then we have objectives underneath them, we can say, 10 years from now, this is where we think we should be, or 5 years from now, this is where we think we should be. But our goal is to improve access. And we can then set ourselves up, and honestly, that's what we did in other strategic plans I worked on, is we had some interim goals, and we said, this is, numeric targets, if you will, as opposed to goals. So I get you, Shep, but I don't think we want to necessarily throw the baby out with the bathwater here.
I'm not trying to throw anybody out. I'm trying to get something that's definable, and we know where we're going, and we know whether we're doing okay. And I get that this is a vision, this is the top level. I devil's advocate could say, we increase the opportunities. We said we're gonna increase them, we increase them. You want a pay increase, you're making $100 an hour, you got $100 in a pay. You got a pay increase. Well, we all know that's ridiculous, right? And so I just like to be, I really like to know where I'm trying to end up in my vision. And this is, like most vision statements, it's sort of fuzzy.
Did you have a thought on this?
I agree with the secretary.
Yeah.
And also on the first comment, the first bullet, I reliably wait for 40 minutes at a particular intersection in my jurisdiction.
But it's reliable.
There's reliability and
Yeah.
Reasonable. Yeah, I mean, it's very
Yeah.
reliable, and I can
Yeah.
also always count on
Reliably
like an hour
Yeah.
wait and an hour to get into DC on 64.
but reliability is important, because if
Yeah.
you know it's gonna be horrible every day,
Yeah, that's
Then you
fine, as
plan
long as you
for
can plan for it.
and when it's horrible 1 out of 10 days and you never know when it is, then it's really even worse.
Yeah.
I guess my response to that would be, well, it obviously wasn't acceptable to have reliably 2-hour waits getting in, and we wouldn't spend $800 million on widening 66. It was reliable ahead of time, and it's reliable
But
right
is
now.
it efficient?
It's reliable right now.
But is it
We're
efficient?
spending $3 billion on the tunnel, but it's reliable right now. It's gonna take
Right.
half a day to get across.
So that's why you've got two different goals, right? You've
I
got
just
goals
don't- I
around
just don't think- I
reliability,
just don't think reliability is.
Right.
is a-
And
is a goal.
efficiency.
and you've got goals around efficiency, because you do want to achieve both.
I would say reliable and reasonable travel times.
And why would we limit it to commuters? Why not all users?
Yeah, for all you. I think it was just a generic term that there was a problem.
Well, I think the use of commuters is, we should be careful of that, because it's not everybody.
Travelers.
Yeah, the third bullet has that broader, for most, basically all the basic church students, right? So it may be a matter of sort of pulling those two concepts together. There's sometimes value in having a super specific goal, because then it's really easy to set an objective. But there's also value in having it broader.
We want to update this first goal based on what we've heard,
Why don't we?
Right now, we can,
you know,
it's very reliable,
Yeah.
you're gonna be stuck in the gap.
So I
Yeah,
think
we have two measures that we
you have
worked
two
on
different
here, right?
measures, yeah. You've got reliability and you've got congestion, right?
Yeah.
And so, like what
It's
we hear,
reliable and congestion.
what we hear from
Exactly.
shipping
I'm
companies,
serious.
and freight providers is they're less worried about about congestion than they are about reliability, because what they need to be able to do is predict when the product will get there, right?
It's the
So
other way
that's the
around.
metric that they worry
They
about.
worry about reliability, not congestion.
So they worry about reliability, and meanwhile, I might worry a lot more about congestion. I don't care that it always takes me 2 hours and I can plan that. That's not acceptable to me, is sort of what I hear you saying. So we may, have an additional goal, or we may take one of those other ones and make it more pointed around, reasonable travel
We're at
times.
that stage right now. I'd make a point that
Yeah.
we currently are reliable.
Yeah. No, reliability is fine, that's one thing, but it's not the only goal, exactly. Are there other sort of goal statements that this group?
We didn't, I'm not sure we got the consensus, so I'll invite the group to take issue with, but we did have a goal in the safety area, which actually relates to what the secretary was just saying. Transportation system will take all actions necessary to achieve zero transportation-related fatalities by 2050. So ambitious, quantifiable.
You think that's? You really think that we're gonna take all, I'm taking action that's necessary to get to that. I can shut the roads down. There's no more fatalities, zero. How else are you gonna do it? Because there's nobody in here that I'm gonna believe that's gonna tell me that's even remotely possible.
Mr. Secretary, it is a stretch goal, but I would suggest that if we were sitting in this room in 1950, and we were to have someone say that we're going to have a stretch goal of making commercial aviation fatality-free in the next 30 to 40 years, they've been laughed out of the room. understand it's a
Well,
stretch.
we haven't made it yet. So.
Well, we have, actually, we've had multiple years of commercial aviation in this country. I think we're going on 40
We
years.
said this country.
I don't want to jinx it, but I understand, but times will change. Technology will change. Opportunities for making our infrastructure safer will change, as it did the aviation
We
industry.
changed the timeline, by the way, it was 2045.
Oh, right, 2045.
Cheated. I just
I see
think,
this as a
I
place
just
to
not,
stretch.
I'm not somebody that subscribes to goals that are attainable. I think they should be smart goals, and the A is for attainable, right? And if I can't get there, I want a goal that I can get to. No matter, I mean, if I try really hard, I don't care if it's a stretch or not, I want to be able to get there. It's sort of like saying everybody in this room is going to work really hard for the next year, the next 10 years, and we're all going to be billionaires when we're finished. Now, if you believe that, then there are plenty of people who have done it, Scott. But if you believe that, then you and I need to go to a cocktail, okay? Because it's not going to happen. It's just not, right? And that's not going to happen either. Now, what I'd like to do is say, cut it by 25%, you know, something that we think we can get to. Because then we can pull and pull together and say, we've got an opportunity. But if I'm a high school basketball team and I say I want to score 100 points in a game, that's one thing. If I want to score 1,000, it's not going to happen. Right? So why have it? It just doesn't, to me, I just, you know, I blow on by it because it's not reality. And
So maybe something we can do there is, as the follow-on, with the staff working on the draft goals, is come up with a couple of variations around that one, perhaps, that have to do with, is it 25%, is it 15, what's the data-driven element that could be included in that, and take a look at that, and deliberate about that, and see if that's a reasonable way to do it.
And
And
take
as
all
Mary was
actions.
saying,
Take all actions is a pretty strong statement.
and take all actions is another strong statement, yeah.
And if you don't want to sit down on the roads, we can change the speed limit to 10 miles an hour and we'll cut a lot of that. We'll get out of the cars and shoot each other.
On the other hand, of course, when you set multiple goals, you're committing yourself to dealing with trade-offs. So most likely, taking all actions necessary might conflict with some of your other goals. So you may be checking and balancing yourself anyway. But maybe there's sort of a sweet spot there where you can get some specificity in the goal statement, and then appropriately leave, as Mary was saying, sometimes it's more in the objectives, that you have more quantity and measure that's more short-term. So
And nobody
try to
in this room
balance
believes
that
we
out.
shouldn't be striving for what that really is trying to get at. Nobody believes that. I mean, I was sort of disappointed in some of the things where safety wasn't number one on the list. We say it's number one on the list. That's what we say that. Safety is the first thing that is our life. That's number one. So I don't think there's anybody that wouldn't support finding ways to drive that down. But I don't think anybody supports take all actions. Because you can do that, literally. I mean, start with the most extreme. Just shut down the roads, you got more accidents. Then it's reduce the speed limit. There's a pretty big push by some to get rid of the 70 miles an hour and dial it back to 60. That's attainable. That's a lot more attainable than zero. But they believe that and they'll show you some data, that the fatality rate between 60 and 70 is pretty substantial, right? So if you cut it back to 60, if that was our goal, I'm not advocating for that, but if that was our goal, we know what it is. We've got to get to 60, right? I just don't know what those other ones are.
So quantitative, what would achieve an 80% reduction?
Just to put something in there as a placeholder, and then, and then.
80% reduction in transportation fatalities. And you adjust that, this is over 20 years, right? So.
You know, I would say something, I would be much more wishy-washy. I'd say, continue to focus. I continue to focus.
I want specificity, but wishy-washy.
Wishy-washy. You all finish that?
do anything. But if we are serious and really wanting to think about this every day, then respectfully, I would say it would be really great if the governor would take these up for next General Assembly, because that will make more of a difference. Just like getting to all electric cars will make more of a difference on greenhouse gas than anything else. And, you know, electric cars is a different story than allowing more flexibility on speed limits and making seatbelt, not wearing your seatbelt a primary offense. So if, you know, we're just gonna dance on the edges of safety. You asked us to take make a stretch goal to lower the fatalities, and the numbers are going in the wrong direction. So I guess we
So you want the governor to fix your problem?
No, I want the governor and the legislature to work together to make the roads on the Commonwealth less dangerous for people who use them.
And what do you expect VDOT to do about that? The point is, the power's in the air. The power's with you.
No,
The
it's
power, yes it is. Who do you think elects the legislators? It's not Steve Bridge.
Well, I will
It's not Jennifer DeBruno, it's
tell
us.
you, Mr. Secretary, I will tell you that I was told when I came onto this board that our job was not to lobby the legislators. It was if somebody called us with a question to answer it, but not to lobby them. And that's the watchword I have used for nearly 7 years. If we're taking a different stance and we're gonna have some shared legislative goals here that we're all gonna work on, I'm in. But I was told that was not my role.
I think we've been lobbying legislators every day of our lives. I think we lobby them for roads, we lobby them for improvements, we lobby for this, we tell them about that. We tell everybody to listen. We do it all the time. All of us. He just did it right now. He's lobbying for changing something. He tells it to his local officials, he tells it to his legislators, he tells it to everybody. That's what he does.
But why would, to Mary's point, why would we as a CTB advocate to the administration in a collective voice as opposed to individually going to legislatures?
I wouldn't put it in a vision document, but
I'm not suggesting that you're a vision document. I'm talking about, I'm
if
talking about areas.
Listen, I think we have the ability as citizens to do whatever we want to do, right? Regardless of whether we're on the CTB or whether we're not. We give political donations, we support candidates, we tell them what we think, and God forsake if we ever stop doing that. I mean, that's our right, right? And we don't give that up when we come. We don't. In fact, we do it every day, all day long. That's what we do. And so I don't have a problem with us pushing, because I think we're going to do that, lobbying, call it whatever you want, advocating. I got no problem with that. I just don't think we can hang it on any one governor or any one legislature because the system doesn't work like that. Now, should this governor take that up? That's up to this governor. Should the previous governor take it up? That was that governor. The previous one of that was that governor. And we ought to be voices in that. We ought to be pushing them to do what we think is right, whether that's collectively or individually. And my biggest view, and this is something that frustrates me, or my biggest, my most specific and obvious thing to me is people know they're not supposed to drink and drive. People know they're not supposed to drive down the road while they're looking at this. People know that they're not supposed to exceed the speed. And people know they're not supposed to drive recklessly. Right? Everybody knows that. There's no one that doesn't know that. Now, they might define recklessly different than you and I. But they still know all those things, and they do it anyway. Now, there's lots of things that people do that they don't know, because they don't know the rules of the road. They don't know the laws we changed this year. They don't know the laws we changed last year. They don't know how many cars you're supposed to be behind the person at 70 miles an hour, because they learned it was at 16 and they're now 66, and they don't remember. They don't know it, right? And what do we do about that? Nothing. We do nothing. Zero. So the laws change, the rules change. We don't have an education program. We don't have a retesting program. We got nothing. Zero. Nah. Maybe a little bit of public service. Maybe. You don't know what those things. We don't know. We don't tell anybody. We don't have a system to do that. And the enforcement is lax.
So, Mr. Secretary,
Because we don't have enough people to enforce it. Because you can't get enough people to come in.
so what of the CTB that we think there should be a recertification of driver's license every 10 years? That's a policy position. That's one way to get people to educate on new laws every 10 or 12 years.
I'm not sure I would personally support that, but I mean, you're going in the right
What I'm
point.
saying in terms of-
There needs to be like some I don't care what job you're in. It's called continuous job training, right? If you're in the professional field and you're a CPA, you're a lawyer, you're required to go get, professional training in order to keep your license. A lot of people do that. Airline, all sorts of people have to go retraining, new systems, new techniques. We put everybody in the state behind a car that weighs 5,000 pounds and goes 100 miles an hour with a modicum of training, and we never give them any more the rest of their lives.
So, Mr. Secretary, in terms of...
If you don't think that impacts that, it does.
In terms of safety, what they say all the time is there's three tools. There's engineering, there's education, and there's enforcement. Engineering is the only one that is
Totally
within
control.
our purview, if you will.
That's right.
We could have a big argument about whether DMV should have all the education money and whether we couldn't deploy it more efficiently or
No
more
question.
specifically than what they're doing and more effectively, but nonetheless. So I guess I would say to you, again, just like greenhouse gas, we don't control it all. We can set some targets, we can work, we can lobby, we can try to do whatever. But sometimes when I listen to you, I just feel like throwing my hands up on safety, honestly, because I feel like we're doing a lot of work, the numbers are going in the wrong direction, and we are not pursuing anything different than what we've done in the past.
What do you want to pursue? Something that says we're going to reduce it to zero by 2045? Is that what you want to pursue?
No,
Then
not
what is it you want-
necessarily.
then what is it you want to pursue?
We said, the one my group did is it'll be safe, secure, and reliable for all users on all travel modes. That's the goal we wrote for safety.
Okay.
So that's where I am. I also think we have to be trying to drive those numbers down.
No question.
And so I'm discouraged. We adopted that lower goal, but I haven't seen much change in what we're doing.
Well, what do you want us to, the question is, you can throw your hands up, now let me finish. You can throw your hands up all you want. The question is, what is it you want us to do differently than we're doing? Specifically.
Okay, I'll tell you specifically,
Okay.
in terms of pedestrian and bicycle fatalities, which are on the rise in my region, I want VDOT to agree to put a camera in any place we've had more than one serious accident or two, and try to understand what the circumstances are that are leading to why that happened. And that's a study of near misses, according to Zach from VTTI. Right now, the localities are trying to scramble to find the money necessarily for some of these cameras because we don't have enough. So if we really want to stop some of these injuries or places where there are major crashes, we have to study these intersections differently. And then once we understand the problem, we have to be willing today to try to implement what the solution is. Not 4 years from now in the revenue sharing program or 6 years from now in smart scale. So we don't have tools to let us necessarily nimbly address some of these hotspots. And we just, we're doing those systemic improvements. The rumble strips, which are the best way to keep people from going off the road, they're not even going to be completed until 2030. And
Well, Mary, I'm not sure what you're asking me to do.
I'm just saying,
You want me to go put a camera on every place there's been an accident? I can't do that. I don't have the money. I don't have the authorization. I've got none of it. I just can't, I don't have the.
So what can we do, Shep, other than what we're doing?
We can say, let's get some sanity in how we integrate pedestrians and bikes and automobiles.
What does that mean?
We don't need, well, there's, sanity of safety. How do they work together so that they're as safe as they can be?
How can you
Right?
understand
Let
that?
me finish. We do it every day. It's called design engineering. We don't sit there and have to watch everything to design something. There's design engineering. And if you saw some of the stuff that was coming through the General Assembly on bills to do things as it related to bike lanes and pedestrians and cars, it would set your hair on fire. Because to me, it was going to totally exacerbate the situation, not fix it. But we got safety engineers that do this all day long, every day. That's their job. They're trained, they're skilled, and they can tell you what the proper design is to minimize the risk, just like they do on the highways with all the different safety improvements we have. I agree with you. I mean, I'm as frustrated by it as you are. But the question is, what mechanisms do we have, and what are we doing with those mechanisms? We have some, right? But we don't have carte blanche. Just don't. And so where's Steve? Steve. Yeah, he's bugged out.
No, he's not.
Where's Kathy? I know. But I mean, the point is, listen, I want the number to be 0. Let's make no claims about that. I want that number to be 0. And I've lost friends in car accidents. I get it, okay? But the question is, what can we do as a group to drive that number down? If we just throw something out that is not attainable and that we have no mechanism to get there, it's as worthless as the piece of paper is worth to me. Now maybe it makes a statement, but what are we really going to accomplish? I want to accomplish something, so I want to know what I can do and how far I think I can get, and then I want to go a little further than that. I want to stretch us, I want to challenge us. I just think to sort of say, let's get it to 0 by 2045 is, okay, what are we going to do with that? Scott?
Mr. Secretary, I think the robust discussion on this points out something that I'd like to request for all of the goals that we set. This is a measurable goal, and so because it's measurable, we quantify what our expectations are. Unlike the goal above, which it's a good goal, but I'm not sure we measure it. Whatever the outcome of this process is, I'd like to request that any goals that we actually set are something that we can measure, and that we identify the measurement metrics as the part of that goal setting. There's an old saying that you can't manage what you can't measure, and I think that very much applies to the work that we're attempting to do in good faith here. I think it's really critically important that as we get to whatever this final goal set turns out to be, that we have a measurement that allows us to understand if we're actually making progress, or if we need to redouble our efforts, or whatever the outcome of that is. The only way we're going to be ultimately successful, as we look at this, we know that there's a specific number here that we can measure, is if we have a measurable goal, or measurable metric for all of our goals.
Well, as you remember when I started this conversation, I said one thing that is a little bit different, perhaps, in this administration is they're highly focused on that, right? Highly. So I agree with you. I'm not sure I'd go as far as to say every goal, but the preponderance of them, I think we need to be able to say, how did you do?
I'm an absolutist. Why can't we say every? You know, we'll call some out.
Because I'm not an absolutist,
Everything we
because I don't like
do
the
now,
words
we
up,
measure.
because I don't like the words absolute. That's why I was.
Can I add something to that? So for the goals, once we have the goals out of this discussion with the board, the next thing is to go, for the agencies to go back and develop the objectives. And those objectives are much more specific and much more measurable than goals. So sorry, this is my planning background coming through. It may be that you want to focus on having us come back to you with some very specific objectives that have measures and deliverables associated with them to help make those goals a reality.
I appreciate that, and I think that's an important part of it. But I would suggest that I and my fellow board members or citizen volunteers generally meet once a month to deal with extraordinary complex issues. And at a high level, we need to be able to establish with some degree of precision what the trends are that come from the decisions we've made. So I understand that there's going to be an agency development of the objectives that come from this, but
They come back to us. They come back to
achieving, hitting the ball out of the park. And I think there are some high-level metrics that we can associate with this goal sets to give us that information.
I don't think there's any question, Scott, but I think what Jennifer's saying is if you had that underneath the transportation, pick your one. Objective number one is reduce this by 10%. I really don't care what line it's on. If it's clear to me that we're going to reduce by 10%, whether it's in the first bullet or it's at the objective underneath it, it's the same for me.
Whatever the numbers are.
Well, but I mean, whether it's in the higher level goal or whether it's in the objective right below it, it says this means 10% of this and 8% of that, 12% of that. You still get what you want, it's just in a different just down. So I mean, I agree. That's what I've been saying.
Well, I'd like to see that be one of the outcomes. I had the good fortune of being a part of early discussions on V-Trans many years ago, and I've watched this process develop and evolve. But I can't tell you whether we've made progress on many of the areas that we define as goals in those 8 or 9 years that have been involved. If we go forward without that commitment that we will be able to track this, I think we're going to be far less effective. We need measurable metrics to go forward.
And if you think about a lot of the VDOTs, take the cost of bridges for example, right? We went through that whole analysis, right? And we said, well, this is, we do this, we do that, and if we invest here, we'll get this return, right? And we went through all that, and we set that, and we decided to do that. And now we'll measure and say, how we doing? To your point, it's exactly what you're talking about. And that's exactly where I am, but I respect, and this is the laughter part, Mary. Yeah, I want to get to where Scott wants to get. I want to get to where Jennifer wants to get. So sometimes at this higher level, I get frustrated because I don't know what it is, and I don't know how to get there. So sometimes, I just gotta chill out, let the objectives come behind them, the OKRs, the key results that we're looking for, and then we got the whole picture. Okay, big picture, we want X. Here's what we think we can accomplish. Here's how we do it. Here are the resources we need. Let's go do it and see how we do it. If we don't, course correct. Either redo resources or change our outlook or whatever it might be and keep going. But until we have that level of specificity, it's someplace, to your point, I don't know how to determine whether we're doing okay or not.
I think it's fair to point out, if you look back at the January 2020 goals, not one that mattered, honestly. Neither the goals nor objectives. But I agree with the Secretary. I think those will work.
Scott.
Unless you can measure. How do you know whether you've achieved the goals?
I have no idea. I'm with you.
Who did that? Who's responsible? Scott?
Scott, Mary and Scott, Shep.
Pretty
No,
hard
I mean, I
time
think
here.
there are numbers, there are things here that say reduce, right? And so
But
if you
they're
had a
not measured.
baseline, sure, you can measure.
Reduce, all right, the
Reduce
same
the
thing you
number
just.
and rate of motorized fatalities and serious injuries.
By what? Reduced by 1 or by 5% even?
Tom, I take that. To say they're not measurable is not correct. They are measurable. What's missing is hit by this date, by this month.
Tell me how you measure
The
Well, you can
number
measure it.
and
You just
rate
don't
of
know what your goal
motorized
is.
fatalities.
You don't know what your goal is.
it. One?
No. What the amount you want to achieve is not stated, but the thing itself, the number and rate of motorized fatalities and serious injuries is something.
But you know that's not sufficient.
I'm not saying it is.
And his point is, he wants more, he wants more.
We all
I
want
want more. I want a number that I think we can get to, even if it's hard to get to, so I know how I'm doing as I'm going along the way, and I know whether I got there or not. Because to Tom's point, to reduce could be infinitesimal and insignificant, and that's not what we want to understand is what we're really trying to get to. Because a reduction that's infinitesimal is not, doesn't matter. We want to get to some place. Where is that place?
Mr. Secretary, can I ask them if it's appropriate that we state that any goals that are associated with this, the goal requires that it have a measurable metric? Just just make that a requirement?
No, I would say that we would want to, in most cases, have a measurable, an ability to have a specific number, specific measurement, and a way to get there. That's not the right way to say it. That we'd have a concrete goal, and we would be able to measure our progress through.
So we're saying the same thing, so
In most cases.
Oh, in most cases. Can you give me an outlier example of where that might not be appropriate?
Of what?
Of a goal that might not lend itself to being quantifiable or measurable, but is important in the context of this discussion.
Well, what I'm suggesting to you is at the highest level of the goal statements, they may not be measurable.
Well, I'm just asking for potential, an example of that.
I'm saying at the highest level of the goal statements, they may not be measurable. Pick one. Safe, secure, and reliable. How do you measure safe and secure? Reliable I can measure, but I can't, I don't have the secure, I don't know what secure means. How do you measure that? So I'm not gonna subscribe to the absolutist theory. I'm gonna subscribe to the concept as valid and one we ought to pursue.
And I think what we've got is a really nice balance of the whole spectrum. Some of the ways we worded things here are appropriate for a vision statement, right? What the end state, the condition we want. Some of the things we've said here are kind of in that sweet spot we were just talking about of I want this by then, right?
That's actually a good distinction.
And then
So
we
those
stop
things that
there.
might not be measurable might be in vision statements rather than
Right,
goals.
right. The end state I want is safe, secure, reliable. It's descriptive, right? And then the goals, you know, I mean, picture goalposts. You know, you picture a location, right? a place you're trying to get to. So the goals we need to be working on that get very clearly from you all. You know, something you want to change from last time is you want them to be more measurable, more specific. That's a shift in some of the language is certainly appropriate for goal setting. And then the objectives are those short-term, you know, those are the things that change the most often, right, based on our midterm needs assessment, our performance evaluation every year, and so forth. So I think we can work with the agency, well, agency staff can work with you all, you know, to craft the distinctly different elements of all three, so that what you wind up with is a really nice, you know, tangible set of guidance here that fits together nicely. You understand short term of where you're going, you understand how that leads you to a longer term goal, you understand why you're doing it at all, which is what's in that vision statement. So we'll do our best to come back to you at the April meeting with a first draft of vision statement, goals, objectives that begin to get at that desired end state that I think you all, I hear you describing. I think that's, does that sound like what you'd like to see? Which is great. I mean, I think that is a wonderful evolution of how the process continues to improve. Any other, Jeff, I think, were there any other things that your group brought up that aren't reflected yet in the collective list here?
Let's see. Well, in the reliability area, we did talk about what causes unreliable conditions, and it's often related to demand exceeding capacity or supply, particularly at peak periods. And so we had a goal that kind of gets at, I'll read it, demand on the transportation system will be managed or spread out to minimize unreliable travel conditions. So it's kind of getting at that demand management part with a reliability as a goal.
Tell me how that works. What can we do? Demand on the transportation system. We don't affect demand.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we do in some regards, but not.
Mr. Secretary, if I could offer an extreme answer to that, it's obviously not realistic, but if we were to pay everybody who was commuting on a certain roadway to not be on that roadway $50,000 a year between 9 and 10 o'clock, that's an extreme example, but transportation demand management is an important part of how we utilize our facilities. And there are many, many opportunities that we have to manage the demand. I think that we miss or don't take advantage of it.
Give me an example other than the circle.
Well, I will tell you that COVID, we've had this discussion in our group. COVID proved that we could eliminate peak demand for our roadways. We lost our rush hours. People could travel pretty much unimpeded during COVID. It's because we had a mass migration from the office to people's homes. As we started to come back, we saw the restoration, the return of rush hours. What can we do at a state level to help manage the demand for our primary employers so that it doesn't occur between the hours of 7 and 9 on our major roadways? And there's a number of things we can do. We can provide economic incentives. We can provide ride-sharing incentives that are outside of the context of building new infrastructure or improving what we have. And as I said to our group, if we can eliminate the need to add the fourth lane by eliminating the peak demand that comes with rush hours, we change this whole dynamic.
Does this board have the ability to do any of that?
I think this board has the ability to at least engage a discussion that would have VDOT consider what they can do from an employer outreach standpoint to attempt these type of things, or understand exactly what agencies might be involved in those discussions. But it's a situation.
I would suggest to you, Scott, that is, that's nice, and I've tried that. And my wife was the largest employer in the state, and when I worked there, and the $50,000 thing works real well, right? It really works well because it's a lot of money.
But maybe $2,000 does as well, sir.
It is direct, but we don't have a mechanism in this, in our, that I'm aware of. Not to do that.
Isn't that what this discussion is about?
Finish. We don't have a mechanism to bend the curve like you're talking about.
Sure, to do what?
To bend the curve like you're talking about.
What do we lack to do employer outreach to?
That's not going to bend the curve to the amount that you're talking about, what I'm saying. That's my experience. I don't think you bend the curve. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying if you expect that to be the panacea, good luck.
So I think there was no expectation on the part of this group that was the panacea, but we consider it a necessary tool in the toolbox if we're going to achieve better utilization of
We're
our
talking about bending the curve. And all I'm telling you is I don't think that's going to bend the curve significantly that you'd even notice. Because I don't think we have a mechanism. At the end of the day, the $50,000 thing was so apt because that is a direct financial incentive and people will react to it. Okay? And the question is, how do we bring the power of that without the $50,000? And it's damn hard. COVID did it. We didn't do it. COVID did it, right? We didn't do that. COVID did that.
What COVID did was prove that it's possible.
We do some of it. Like, maybe not to the extent that he's describing, but you have a bus-only lane. That's another example. You want to encourage ride sharing, you want to encourage the use of buses. Providing a bus and having them sit in the same traffic that everybody else is sitting in is not going to help people.
What we were talking about was not the demand, what I was talking about was not the demand between the bus and the ride share and the car and the walking. It was the demand to go somewhere. You got to go there.
Yeah, we were saying spread out the demand to
Yeah, but the bus doesn't spread out the demand.
I'd be
glad.
It's the employer changing their time.
That was
It's
one
spread out
idea
the
we
demand.
discussed. Another was
I'd be glad to modify that to say to minimally impact traffic flow during peak periods.
You know, it's a tool we ought to use. As long as we get more return than we put in.
I stress that this is a visioning session.
Yeah.
And I think one of the comments that have come from others, this is where we kind of stretch our thinking and consider the art of the possible outside of our day-to-day conventions that we've lived with. So if you'd like to modify it, I'm fine with that.
No, I just suggested to you that the demand curve is not going to shift that much by what you're doing. It doesn't say that we shouldn't try to do that.
clear line because that's one of the programs in PRPT. So there's ways of, you know, the agency that already has business plans and objectives around transportation management. So, thank you. I think we're about ready to wrap, right? So I'm gonna close this off. We'll come back in April with first draft vision, goals, objectives. I think our goal is is for the staff to come back by the committee meeting, right? With requests for approval. So that should
All right, just a minute here. I think I want to thank everybody for coming today. I would definitely want to thank Renique and Jatinder and all the facilitators today that helped put today's event or exercise together. And as was stated, our work now is to come back to you in April with drafted versions of the vision, the goals, and the objectives to go toward them. So I think with that, we'll probably